Again to the Academy on Computers. This time we look at the way networks extend the usefulness of your computer. And we'll have 3 studio guests who show us what kind of networks they're involved in. And of course, Jim Butterfield is with us again to help us and the computers make the right connections. Jim, what trick are you going to put the microcomputers through this time?
Well, making the connections is exactly what we're going to do, Jack, because we're going to establish communications with this VIC-20 computer from another computer we have over on the other side of the studio.
We're going to talk to each other?
Talk to each other.
Now, why would we do that? To share resources and information?
Well, there are many reasons why you might want a computer to talk to each other. Sharing resources, sharing information is one thing. But small computers such as these ones can talk to big computers to get a large data banks of information, for example, or a small computer might want to call up a big computer to use its resources. It has a job that takes too much time, it takes too much computer power. It hasn't got it. You can call up a big computer and give it the job. It can leave messages. It can put up messages. There's a lot of things you can do with communication.
All right, how do we do this? Do we do it by cables, telephone lines? What?
Well, there's a large number of ways we can do it. Certainly, we have cables to link computers together. We have telephone lines that we can use to connect to computers to do that. We can also hook it up over specially prepared communications lines that are a little bit classier than telephone lines. And of course, we have many other things such as satellite, and I've even seen communications over a beam of light.
Will there be different capabilities then between communications depending on the software?
Oh yes, that's very important. You have to decide what your application is and set your communications so that they fit the kind of application you need.
All right, what capabilities have we here? What's the setup for?
Okay, well this is a VIC-20, but I'm not going to use this. This is your computer. I'm going to call you from a computer we have over on the other side of the studio, Jack.
Well, what do you want me to do?
You don't have to do anything. Don't call me. I'll call you.
I've heard that line before.
Okay, fine. Now, I have your number, Jack. And I'm going to call it, and I think... There you are.
Hello?
I'm not calling you. I'm calling the VIC-20. So what you should do, Jack, is reach over and press the little white switch, the little switch in the back of that white box you see on the back of the computer.
Right.
Okay, fine. You have your connection made.
It's for you.
Good. Now, while you're doing that, I'd like to show you the pieces on the Atari 800 here, which is going to do the other end of the communication. First of all, we have the keyboard, of course, where I type. Secondly, there's a program inside the Atari 800 that picks up what I do on the keyboard and relays it to the modem, which I have over here. This modem has a couple of suction cup-like things, and I'm going to plug the telephone in here. In here is a tiny little loudspeaker that speaks into the transmitter of the telephone. In here is a microphone that will listen to what comes from the line from your end. And we plug it in just like that. And we try to get a nice tight connection. Okay, that looks like a fairly reasonable connection there. So I'm going to type a message to you, Jack. Here. Okay. Did you get the message?
I've got the message.
Very good.
Now, surely you didn't go to all this trouble with the setups of the pieces to type hello to me.
Well, no, I could have said that in person, Jack,
right.
But there are many reasons why we want to establish communication between computers. This is a demonstration of the fact that the pieces aren't really terribly complex.
Well, what about all these pieces, though? I mean, I buy them separately. What should I look for as I get pieces for the setup?
Well, it usually depends first on the kind of computer you have. You'd go down to your computer dealer. You saw that I had a somewhat different arrangement over on that end than I have on the VIC-20 here. I can hold up the modem, and you can see that this is quite a different thing than we had.
What difference in the modem you had over there?
That's quite different from what we had on the Atari.
You don't plug the phone into that one?
No, that goes straight into the telephone line. You notice you just hung up the telephone, and we have the connection directly here.
All right. Now, is this an expensive setup to buy? I mean, we have to get the extra...
Well, it varies according to the kind of modem that you want to do. You can buy classier modems, fancier modems, higher speed modems, special purpose modems, and these can cost more money, but they can be relatively inexpensive, probably from something under $100 to, if you want to go on the high end, several $100s in price.
All right, well, I need some help setting it up.
Well, usually when you buy all of the pieces for your machine, you'll get instructions and manuals and information. You can always ask the dealer about things like that.
All right, now, there's just one more question. You mentioned this was a VIC-20 that I had, right? And you had an Atari over there?
That's an Atari 800 over there.
Now, we communicated. Now, I start to think about software and program and compatibility.
I see. You got scared off because you remembered that you can't take programs right out of one computer and load them straight into the other computer, and now we seem to have some very good communications between the two machines. Well, programs are the hard part. Data and messages are the easy part, because when we send information over telephone lines, we use a standardized type of transmission. There's a standard, for example, called ASCII, A-S-C-I-I. That stands for the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. All computers use it to communicate over telephone lines, and so we have a standard that all computers recognize, and as a result, one computer can communicate data or messages to a different kind of computer without any trouble at all.
As long as you follow the standard.
And pretty well all of them do.
All right. These dial-up communications may be great for home computers, for hobbyists, whatever. But suppose I'm in business. You know, would I need a network?
Oh, sure. There's lots of reasons why you'd need to get outside of the little computer area when you have a business system. For example, you might be calling up a database. You might want anything from stock quotations to business statistics to airline schedules, whatever you have in mind. The next thing that you have to consider is when you have a business, you may want to send or receive messages, for example. Another thing you might want to do, if you have a job that's too big for a little computer, you can connect to a big computer and send the job, have the big computer do the work for you. There's many reasons you'll want to communicate.
But we're still talking about dial-up systems, are we? Yeah, when you do that?
Well,
are there other systems as a business person I'd want to use?
Okay, the examples I've given have been dial-up, but there are other ways that you can hook computers together, especially if they're in the same building or the same room. These are called local networks, and of course, when you're in the same room, you don't have to do it by a telephone call, even though we happen to do that just now. There are other, more efficient ways you can transmit or connect between different computers.
Well, what advantage has the local network then?
Well, the local network, first of all, can transfer information faster, and secondly, it can perhaps be a little bit less expensive and a little less clumsy than having to use telephones all over the place.
Would be set up in an office or a classroom, for example?
Yes, reasons where you'd want more than one computer working together on the same unit of data. You might have an idea of workstations. You have one person working on one machine, another person working on another machine, but doing essentially the same job. You'd want them sharing resources on the same computer. And that happens in business and in the classroom.
All right, we have a system set up over here. Could you show me
that?
that?
One right over here. Yes, let's go and take a look.
This time I'll go with you. No more phone calls.
Okay, good. No, this one is all tied together by cables.
This is what we call a local network.
This is a local network, and it's all tied together with this central box here called a network controller. This links together the two computers. There are usually many more than that, but here we have only two. Now, the situation is that for this kind of network, one of these is designated a central controller. It's called a central computer, and it effectively controls all of the others that we connect on. This over here, we have a satellite computer. If it wants to do anything, it has to call in and ask permission. For example, we could have programs stored on disk here, and if this satellite or auxiliary computer wanted access to these programs, it would call the central computer and say, please give me this information. But the central computer controls everything. Similarly, suppose this one wanted to put something on the printer. It couldn't do it directly. It once again would send its request through the central computer, and that would transfer.
There could be more than one of these satellites, more than one of these slaves.
You could have quite a bunch of those slaves, and usually
could they all get information at the same time?
Well, Jack, obviously you can't go to a disk at the same instant when you have different things going there. Certainly you can load programs at almost the same time, but never exactly. But there's perhaps a general question that you have to address. Let's see if I can put it by means of an example. Suppose we had a small, say, reservation system or inventory system, and suppose we have, say, 3 seats available on a certain airline flight. You have a small airline, Jack, and you're flying them around. We have 3 seats available. I call up on one machine in the network. How many seats? It says 3. At the same time, you're talking to a different customer on a different phone call.
And only one of us will get those, and that's the problem. I would find out.
So you have to sort it out so that it doesn't conflict.
Thank you very much, Jim. Jim and I will be right back with our guests for more demonstrations about networking.
Attention Academy participants. Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, the number to call for information about the Computer Academy is area code 416-484-2648. In addition, a computer specialist is stopping by on weekends to answer your questions. If you're having trouble understanding a particular point or carrying out a procedure, call area code 416-484-2614 Saturday and Sunday mornings from 9 a.m. to noon.
Our three guests in the studio have all had experience connecting computers to other computers in various ways. We have with us a lawyer, a freelance science writer, and a teacher. And Jim, what has our first guest got to tell us about his network?
Lou, good to see you. Would you like to tell us what the equipment is that you have here?
Jim, this is a DisplayPhone unit, which is a combination telephone and computer terminal.
But it's not a computer.
It's not a computer.
How do computers fit into this then?
As a terminal, the DisplayPhone has the ability to communicate with terminals all around the world.
Okay, now you're connected to a computer right now?
Yes, we are.
Very good. You'd like to show us what it can do?
Sure. We're currently connected to the source information database, and the particular database that we're getting into in that network is airline reservations. So if I want to find out what the airline scheduling would be between 2 points, let's say, for example, Toronto, and we'll put it in there.
Okay.
And in the U.S., you don't you put in Canada rather than a state. They're unable to distinguish there.
I have no problem.
Okay. Now let's take a rather unique type of connection, which would be Pembroke,
Ontario.
Canada.
Right. Right. Okay. Good.
Okay. I'll see what the computer comes back with.
Okay. Now it's going to search out all of the airlines that fly between those 2 points.
That's right.
And it's going to give you when they fly and what the times are, and
it'll provide the scheduling for the airlines that provide service between those 2 points. And I could have restricted these more by saying I want all the information available between 2 different time frames.
Okay, now you're searching through a large computer, the source, to find this information. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay, good. I'd like to ask you a little bit more about this setup. I see that the keyboard fits away neatly inside the machine. It just slides away and tucks right in there when you're not using it. And in here we must have a built-in modem, because there isn't a modem outside here. When I was looking at the computer working a moment ago, it seemed to be coming out about the same speed you would read it at. Now, what's the point in sending it faster if you can't read it that fast? Why would you use a more expensive modem for that?
Well, the prime reason would be for economy. Some databases are fairly expensive when you sign on to them. For example, you can be paying anywhere from $8 an hour up to $300 an hour.
Okay,
so the faster the information comes through, the quicker you can read it and save it, and the lower the cost.
Yeah, and not have to pay for it anymore.
Exactly.
Okay, speaking of that, perhaps you should disconnect here, because I'd like to ask you about a couple of more things.
Sure.
Okay. Now, you use computer communications for more than just that, more than just calling into a database and searching for information. Is that right?
One of the other uses, actually one of the prime uses I use it for, is something in the nature of electronic mail. For example, here in the Envoy web system, I can access that particular network by pushing the appropriate soft key on the terminal and then selecting the line. The DisplayPhone will go ahead and dial the number for me, and again, let me pull up the keyboard. When the connection is made, I've taught the unit how to automatically send the required information into the system, so that in fact it needn't be keyed in specifically each and every time.
Okay, but what are we doing here? What's the point of connecting this new computer?
Okay, what we're doing is we're signing on to the computer owned by the telephone company, which acts as a repository of information that is exchanged back and forth between different users. And very much the same way the post office works.
Do you mean messages?
Messages, mail.
Okay.
Like if you look at the screen now, Jim, you'll see about 4 or 5 messages coming on, indicating information that I have to read and respond or deal with.
Okay, Lou, let's leave messages for the moment, because there's a few more questions I'd like to ask you. You bring in information here, you're picking up messages, I can see that. Do you bring in pictures and things like that?
Oh, sure. For example, if you're game-oriented, there's a system in the United States that you can connect with and play chess with someone down in California over the telephone lines. And you have a graphic all drawn out on your screen.
I see. Okay, and in other forms of research, you do legal research on this?
Yes. Systems such as QuickLaw gives one the ability to get into a legal database and research all the relevant cases around a particular issue. For example, if you wanted to isolate every case that's in the database dealing with motor vehicle negligence and involving a child under the age of 12 in the province of Ontario, the computer would search that information, pull it out, and give it to you.
And you do that regularly?
Yes, it's done quite regularly in our offices.
Thank you, Lou. Now we'd like to turn to a user who uses a communication system for journalism. I'd like to talk to Lydia Dutto. Lydia, how are you?
Hi.
Very good. Could you tell us the equipment that you have here? This is interesting.
This is a portable computer. It's it's light enough and small enough it fits into an attaché case so that you could take it on a trip with you. It would fit under the front seat of an aircraft, and you can use it in your hotel room or even in an airport, anything like that. This could be used for journalists if they're writing stories while they're traveling. And what we would do here, for example, I've got a sample of a story that I might save. So it's already stored in the computer there. And this particular device has a little printer that goes with it. So that this is the story that I have written in here. It's stored in the memory in here. This is an extra memory pack. The little printer, as you can see, will print out anything that I have written here. This will attach it to the television monitor in your hotel room, so that you don't have to travel with a monitor.
I was wondering how you got that under your airplane.
You don't have to. You can attach it to any telephone in your hotel room. Now, what we'll do now is that's the story we have there, so we will try and send that to another location. And what we do is we're just setting it up to send, and we turn on. That's the little beeping noise, and then you plug your telephone in your hotel room or in the airport, wherever. And it's connected, and then the necessary connections are made. The computer at the other end gets the message, and you dial your number, whatever it is, and the computer at the other end picks it up, and the story is sent.
Okay, now
and when it's over, you can just disconnect.
You would send that perhaps into your newspaper then?
That's right. I have used it for that type of thing when I was covering the space shuttle for the Globe and Mail. For example, I had another type of a portable system that was somewhat like this, and I was writing my stories while it happened, and this was during the first launch, and they had delays with the computer on the shuttle, and so we were constantly through the day. I was revising the story, changing it, new information, etc. When I came to my deadline at the end of the day, I just picked up the phone, plugged it in. 30 seconds later, it was in the Globe and Mail computer in Toronto.
So your computer worked better than theirs did?
Well, this was a small portable unit that was designed specifically for journalists. As a matter of fact, when I was traveling, I spent 3 hours waiting for a plane in an airport, and I worked on my story while I was in the airport. And when I was finished with it, any telephone that's available, you plug it in, and the story gets sent. This particular unit is also very good for using on an aircraft because it's self-contained. You don't have to plug it into anything. So you can just take out this little section here, and you can sit there, put it on the table in front of you in the aircraft, and you can work on your story, writing it while you're on the aircraft.
Okay, and there's a little strip on there where you can see the part of the story that
That's right. When you don't have a monitor like that, you have a single line display, and you're able to move, up and down, back and forth through your story to see what you've got on your screen. And you can insert and delete material and all the rest of it.
Okay, now I can see that you can use that for writing stories. Do you also use, this is still a computer, and you could use it for researching stories? Could you call up a database and ask it for background information?
Sure. You could, using the same telephone connection that we just demonstrated here, you could call up a computer that has a whole bunch of information, news information or whatever kind of information, and it would take the information from that computer into this computer. You could store it. It has memory in here, and it also has an extra memory pack here.
Now this is interesting memory because when you turn the computer off, the information stays.
That's right, and this is the equivalent in this system of what you see on the disk drive on some of the other systems. It's memory storage, and you can store the story that you get or the information you get from the database in the memory. You can also print it out on the printer.
So before you would write an article, for example, on the Alprop, you'd take a look at what might have previously been published on that, and
you could search for information that's relevant to any of the stories that you've written. Now, one of the other things that I do with my home computer system is I have a partner who works with me. We work on stories together, and so when we're working on drafts of stories, I will send a copy from my computer to his computer, and he'll send back to me. So we're able to collaborate really over the phone.
Good. It's more than just another kind of typewriter. It really changes the way that you write stories?
It definitely does. It cuts the writing time on a story about in half, and it leaves you more time to be creative, to work on the writing, while it does all of the sort of the Joe jobs, the inserting, deleting, changing, that sort of thing.
I see. And even when you haven't got it plugged in, it's still a computer, so you can still use it for the other things you'd use a computer for.
This particular unit, yes, it is self-contained. It does not have to be plugged in, although you can plug it in if you
Even
wish.
other computers, you don't have to use the modem. They're still computers.
Oh, that's right, yes. The modem lets it talk to other computers, but they can do their work on their own if they want to.
Very good. Thank you, Lydia.
Thank you.
We'd like to turn to somebody who's using a computer in a different kind of network, and that is in the schoolroom. Colin, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
I gather that you use quite an extensive computer network in your school environment. Is that right?
In the school that I teach, we have a laboratory set up with 14 apples networked to a hard disk drive.
Okay, now we didn't have room for 14 apples in the studio, so we can't show your system here as we've done with some of the others. But could you tell us more about how it's made up?
The hard disk drive is like having 67 of these stacked one on top of the other.
You mean it has that much storage?
It has a large amount of storage. The advantage of the hard disk drive is it's in a closed environment. You never touch the hard disk drive as you would with a floppy disk and spoil the read-write area on this floppy disk. The access time for reading information from the hard disk is faster than the floppy disk.
Okay, so you have a huge amount of storage, but what do you use this controller network for?
The students use the hard disk drive to store the programs they've worked on. I also use the network to send a demonstration program down the line to all the students' computers so they can see what the program should look like.
Can you show us an example of that?
Well, I can show you an example of a program the students have worked on. And the assignment for this program was they had to learn the integer function of the computer. They had to learn the random number generator for the computer. And we put it all together in a game of craps.
Oh,
so
good.
I'm going to ask the computer to run the game of craps for us.
Okay, now this was not written by you. This was written by
This is a student program.
And all of your students wrote a program similar to this?
Similar to this.
This is part of a computer science course?
Yes, it is.
Good. Let's take a look at it briefly.
All right, it's a simulation of the game of craps. And the second part of the you're seeing the finished product.
All right.
Their first part of the assignment was to just get the computer to work the roll of the die.
So you were calling on them to create a bigger and bigger program as they went.
The second stage was to not only have that part working correctly, but to input a part with $10 or whatever amount of money they wanted to start with and keep track of the bet.
Okay, put $5 on the next one for me, will you?
$5?
Good, thanks.
I'm sorry, you lost.
Do you want the money now, or is my
No,
credit good?
it's all mythical money, so nobody wins or loses in this game of craps.
Okay, very good. Does this change the role of the teacher? Here you are, you're sitting now in front of a computer, and your students are arranged at their own computer, and you're telling them, put it into the system, and I'll look at it later. Is this changing your role? Are you a different kind of teacher?
I find I'm becoming more of a resource teacher. I'm finding I'm having to learn things myself in order to keep up with the strides some of these students have made. Some of the students learn to program computers very quickly.
Okay, now this is a mathematical thing that you're doing with this computer.
Yes,
You've just gotten $5 out of my money here. And what I'd like to know is this really what a computer network like this is for? Is it for math or are there other subjects?
There are other subjects it could be used for. It could be used for music, it could be used for English and word processing, all sorts of areas in the field of education.
Have other teachers looked at this system?
Yes, other teachers have come up and had a look at it. I've had teachers from outside of the school come in and look at it.
What do teachers think when they walk in and they see all of these computers and all of these disk controllers and other things like that?
The teachers that are not familiar with computers are a little overawed by all the noise, the light flashing. Those who've had a little bit of experience with computers soon learn that this hard disk drive and the network is a fairly friendly animal.
Okay, one last question. What do the students think about having this kind of computer network?
Well, I'm there from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5:30 at night, and the place is humming, so I think that speaks for itself.
Jim, before you lose any more money to Colin, I'd just like to throw a quick question out to the panel in the last few seconds we have. What is the most exciting thing you see in the future for your computer network? Anybody?
Telecommunication on a worldwide basis by way of satellite. It would be quick, inexpensive, and enable anyone in Toronto, for example, to communicate with individuals in Australia, New Zealand, Asia, and do it strictly on a spontaneous, inexpensive basis.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Lydia. Gentlemen. And Jim and I will be right back to answer your questions. Next week on Bits and Bytes, computer languages. Billy Van and Lou Bagoy will show us BASIC, COBOL, and APL. Billy will also write a short program in Logo. And we'll see children using Logo in the classroom. That's at 9 p.m. At 9:30, I'll be back with Jim Butterfield and his guests for further hands-on exploration. So next week, watch Bits and Bytes at 9 and join us at 9:30. Jim, just time for 2 or 3 questions that have come in since the last program, and I think one viewer is having a bit of fun with us, but I'd like your answer. When we saw a computer used to store genealogical records, would you say these records are stored on a relative file?
I think that's a joke, but it's true all the same, Jack. The records were stored on a random access file, which some people call a relative file. But there's more that we can say to that, because you should probably think of information not stored on a single file, but on a collection of files. One that has perhaps names and dates of birth, and another one that holds records of marriage. And in this way, different files interrelate to create not just a file, but a database.
Right? I have a small computer and cassette tapes and a small budget. Which should I buy next, a printer or a disc?
Well, it's hard to make a decision. I'd personally recommend, other things being equal, that you go for the printer, because that will help you organize your work, your programs. You can lift them out, study them in hard copy, make notes on them, and so forth. But that's not an absolute answer. If data is terribly important to you, then think about a disk, because that's very, very good for handling and manipulating a great deal of data.
All right. I hear references about a mini computer. Sounds to me like a small computer. So that should be the same as microcomputers? Are they different?
Yes, they're really quite different. They come from a different time. Many computers started in the mid-1960s, and they started out generally as large computers that had been stripped down, economized, compact models so that they could be purchased economically. What was involved there was not new technology, but some economies in the way that you built the computer. Now, microcomputers came in the 1970s, and they were based on completely different technology, the computer on a chip or the microchip. So they were quite a revolution, each in its own way. I should mention, by the way, that many computers, in the many years since they first came out, have been improved and changed and corrected so that now you can't classify them purely as stripped-down computers anymore.
Time for one more quick one. I heard somewhere that I shouldn't smoke while I'm using a computer. Is that right?
Well, computers are pretty tough and robust, but there's a couple of good reasons not to smoke too much when you're in the vicinity of the computer. First of all, it's possible that the information on disks might be harmed by small smoke particles that stick to it. And secondly, the keyboard that you're typing on may be damaged by ash falling into the keyboard itself. So be careful where you keep your cigarettes. Don't smoke too much when you're around a computer. It may harm your data.
Thanks, Jim. Next time, computer languages. Jack Livesley with Jim Butterfield inviting you to join us then on The Academy.
This program